When Bhagwan Nithyananda opened the doorway, it was like a flood that came out, and since then I've been completely immersed.
Dino Petridis is a renowned psychologist, a deep thinker, and a master of emotional intelligence. His journey spans decades of research, self-discovery, and breaking through illusions of the mind.
I had like a huge breakdown in my life, and then when I limped out of it, I said, no, something is not working. I was already a professor.
What was that breakdown?
Well, it was a complete inner psychological. I was just shattered all of a sudden.
So then what is the anatomy of fear?
I have like a graph that shows psychologically how these emotions come about and what the difference is between the two fundamental emotions that create everything else are greed and fear.
When you met Nithyananda ji, you surrendered yourself.
I could hear him. He was reaching inside. It's a
Hey, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and be on the podcast, the Ex-Monks Drive Petridis. Thank you so much.
I am very happy to be here. I'm delighted, and I know that you've gone a little bit out of your way to organize this in a last-minute kind of situation.
Pleasure
and I'm very,
is,
very grateful for that.
Pleasure is always ours. I can't afford to miss this opportunity. By the way, what should I be calling you? What would you be comfortable with, Dino or
Dino,
Petridis?
I think is the easiest way to call me. I mean, I go by a lot of different names, including my Indian names as well.
What is your Indian name?
So I've got my first initiation. I was initiated as Pautram, which means like heir or grandson. So he's got this idea.
Yeah, Pautram.
That's it. Pautram is a beautiful name. And my second one was Krishna Sevak Das, which is in the Vaishnava tradition.
Yeah.
So I answer to these names. I'll answer to Dino, Constantine, Petridis, Petridis.
Yeah.
All will do. But call me Dino. I think it's the easiest.
Yes,
it's
let's
the
go
easiest
ahead with
on.
Dino. Even I would love to call you Pautram as well.
Yeah. Well, Pautram works perfectly for you. Might get like different energies manifesting with this kind.
So, Pautram, help me understand. How did you get introduced to the world of Krishna consciousness? Now that's out of syllabus, I know this.
Yes. Well, I was always, as I said, I was initiated in Greece when I was 11 years old, and that was extremely rare. That was like mid-80s then, by Paramhamsa Satyananda, who's from Bihar School of Yoga.
Yeah.
So, direct descendant, like the Sivananda lineage. I didn't do anything, with it, for many, many years until I just reconnected many, many years after. And then when the reconnection happened, through my beloved Bhagwan Nithyananda, who doesn't have a very good name in this country, unfortunately, but I mean, he reconnected me, and I can never downplay this. I mean, he was the one who was completely instrumental with reconnecting me, and then that reconnection was very, very strong with India. And then I met my second wife, who was Vaishnava, and then that was when I first took my first trip to India, which was in Govardhan, Vrindavan.
Yeah.
And as you know, there is like all Radhe Radhe, Krishna consciousness, you can't avoid it. That's when I got my second initiation. Yeah. But of course, also, the books of Prabhupada are very widely distributed in London. There are temples there. There is a very active Hindu community. And so from there as well, I mean, I had come across, it's just that I wasn't paying too much attention, over the years when I was coming across this literature, I wasn't like mature enough for it. But when that happened, and when Bhagwan Nithyananda opened the doorway, it was like a flood that came out, and since then I've been completely immersed.
It's quite fascinating, Pautram, because most of the videos that we get to watch from Nithyananda ji, it's over the top. It's at a very different trajectory. What is it that we are missing that you are aware of?
Well, as you know, Gaurav, the connection that an individual has with their guru, and the guru can come in many different shapes and forms.
It's very pious, it's very personal.
It's very pious, it's very personal, and that's exactly, I mean, you could be seeing things that somebody else, is complete, or that the same things are being, or same areas and energies are being unlocked by someone else. Like, for example, Sadhguru is a great presence here, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and I like listening to them, I recognize, but they don't do what Nithyananda does for me.
Yeah.
So it's completely beyond mind. Now, I'm not saying that these same openings cannot be achieved by a different person. I'm not saying that. But I don't think that there are openings higher than these that Nithyananda has opened, Bhagwan Nithyananda has opened for me.
Absolutely. We don't need to follow only one person to find the solace for ourselves, to find the liberation for ourselves. You know, every time when I visit Gurdwara Bangla Sahib Ji, there's one statement that speaks to me. It says that there is but one God, and by Guru's grace, he's obtained.
Yes.
And now, who happens to be your Guru, or who happens to direct and guide you in the direction where you are supposed to be going?
That's right. And you need to have faith there. That's faith is quite important, because it's quite dangerous if someone who's got like multiple gurus, and there's some people just doing shopping from one to the other, and then the ego is the final arbiter of what you're going to follow, because you go like 5 different people, you might have 5 different things. So it's quite important, I think, to have the connection with one guru who is going to do who you have faith in.
Potram, I'm a firm believer that you fall in love. You cannot plan love.
Yeah.
Same is the case with spirituality. And also what I've also realized is that unless something happens in your life, you don't take a pause, reflect, and start to believe on something which is beyond yourself. What was that moment in your life when you took a pause in your childhood, when you started to reflect?
My childhood was wild. I mean, and not just a childhood. I mean, I was completely wild for a long period of my life, and created, you know, a lot of problems that I had to deal with afterwards. So for me, I mean, the reconnection happened when I had, like, it's a pretty common story. I had like a huge breakdown in my life, and then when I limped out of it, I said, something is not working. I was already a professor. So, or just I had an academic appointment, not a professor.
If I may ask,
yet, but,
what was that breakdown?
Well, it was a complete inner psychological breakdown. I mean, I was just shattered all of a sudden, and that lasted for quite some time. And when I limped out of it, I said, something's not working here, because you know, I felt completely devastated. So I said, something needs to change. And then I made a genuine, honest promise to myself that I'm going to start looking after myself, you know, rather than my career or what it is, external gratification and trying to achieve things. So I said, I'm going to have to look after myself first, which means just do my meditation. I'm going to start some meditation. So I'm not going to be so go-getting with my work. And I'm going to be honest with my meditation. I'm going to prioritize it. And I'm going to do some relevant reading as well. And I'm going to prioritize my well-being over my career and achievement and anything else. And that's how I started reconnecting. I mean, I started doing my meditation.
And you said by that time, you were also, at that point in time, you were already a practicing psychologist.
On the way to become a reader in psychology and psychology, just one step behind. I had a tenured position in the University of London at that point. So it was a tenured position. I was on the way to full professorship. So I was doing very well. My research was doing very well. All the trait emotional intelligence, my instrument was doing very well. Everything was doing very well. And I was working hard to promote it and to do the needful, what needs to be done. And at that point, I had a breakdown. So I said, that's just not working for me. I mean, I didn't know that it was, I mean, it's working at a surface level, you know, it's doing things and it's helping others at a surface level. But if I'm having a breakdown like this, which was very severe, I mean, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't child's play, it was like really, really severe breakdown. I said, you know, that something's seriously missing here. So I got to find out, well, I tried to find out what it is. And I'm going to recalibrate my life towards well-being and start doing all the things that I knew need to be done. I mean, my father was also in that world, like dipping in and out of it. I mean, he was into Buddhism, and, you know, I had to go to him when I had my breakdown. And he said, you know, I remember at some point he said, just put a pack of books on the table. So, that's all I know. And it was like, you know, Buddhist books. And that's my solution. I have nothing else to say. So, so I started reading, and I took things seriously. And then I was lucky enough to have some breakthroughs. That was the point where I caught Bhagwan Nithyananda on YouTube. And of course, you know, people say, you know, from YouTube. Well, it was from YouTube. I mean, that's how it was. And I completely fell in love, and one thing led to the other. Yeah. And here we are today.
As you mentioned, that you were a practicing psychologist, and you were about to step into a role of a professor. And yet you experienced a breakdown. What do people wait for? And what happens? That is it like I'm waiting for a breakdown to happen, only then I would have a breakthrough? Or how does that work?
Well, you don't have an inkling. If your life is going well on the surface, you don't have an inkling that this sort of thing is going to happen to you. So that is, I think, part of grace as well. Which, of course, it doesn't feel like grace. In hindsight, because if something like that doesn't happen, then you're simply in a trajectory of doing more and more and more, and you're missing possibilities and energies inside you that are completely ineffable. You would never come close to these possibilities. I mean, I would have never done any of my inner work and then met any people like you. I wouldn't be here today. There's no possibility, because I would be following the trajectory that gives me that external success. And you're doing more and more of this, and you just don't know what you're missing. You have no idea, and that's why people don't discover, because they think they're doing well. I mean, you give a man what's like a bank balance, a house, 2 cars, a wife and 2 kids, and they're going to be very, very happy. And that's all it takes. So if you have the grace, which comes many times.
A friend of mine, I mean, he tells in a very profound way, communicate the way he communicates. He says that unless you're willing to sit at the heart of the emotion, which is unprocessed, unless you're willing to sit in the heart of the emotion which is unprocessed, life will continue to create situations for you. Life is not going to stop you, because life is a beautiful teacher. Life is going to continue to put you in a situations where you will have to process that emotion, right? And he says that's the reason why the statement stands so profound, that you grow through what you go through. Rumi said something so profound. How do you want me to clean your mirror when you get irritated with every rub? Right? And I found it so profound that, and also because you use the word that when you met Nithyananda ji, you surrendered yourself. Irrespective of what people are talking about him, because that's where you
At that point, the thing hadn't started. It was a little bit before that thing started. Now, that thing started, but I didn't, and I was shocked in the beginning when that happened. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? But it just bounced back very, very quickly. I said, I don't have tofu faith, because I could hear him, he was reaching inside. It's none of my business. It's not like I don't believe, I'm not interested in it.
Extremely important.
Yes, it's not like I don't believe it, and I think this is none of my business. It just doesn't enter my relationship into my relationship with him. So whatever happens since then, and some of it is that, it's none of my business. I've never had any genuine interest in that, other than the initial shock, because I remember there was a program in London that we were all going to, and I was so happy that we were going to meet him, and that was all shot because of that. He took the passport away, and everybody there, because I met many of his disciples there, they were shocked, and a lot of them dropped out. But I bounced back very, very quickly, and it's just, and that was it. From then on, I didn't have any.
Yes. So, Petridis, help me understand. You have been a student of emotions and a professor on emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And it is one subject which the world is talking about, and the researchers, after researchers, have proven the impact of emotional intelligence on an individual's well-being, on their mental health, on the leadership and the management capabilities that they have. How do you define emotional intelligence, and why do you think it is becoming more and more important in the complex world that we are a part of?
Well, so I've got my own theory, which is a theory of trait emotional intelligence, and it's to do with the perceptions that we have about our emotions in our emotional world, which are extremely important. So it doesn't matter, what other people think of us, or what their objective measurements of emotion, but really what we believe about our emotions, just like what we believe about life, our capabilities, what we got. So these perceptions that we have about ourselves and our life. So that's what the trait EI is mainly about. Integration of personality traits, emotions, and intelligence broadly defined. Why is it becoming more and more important? Well, in fact, it looks like AI seems to be becoming more and more important, accentuated in the last few years. But that, I think, brings like a flattening of the curve, like it democratizes all sorts of individual differences in cognitive ability, in learning languages. So that's becoming flattened out. All these skills are being flattened out. So what is it that is going to differentiate, let's say, performance in the workplace?
Yeah.
It's going to be the ability to relate to other people, the ability to understand other people, to lead them, to be able to read between the lines. All these things are quintessentially emotional, all those things and aspects that have to do with one's personality and the inner core of their being. So not the logical mind, which is now being replicated, as we say, and replaced to some extent, or a lot of those functions, by machines and algorithms. Yeah. Everybody will be able to write great English. It took me, I don't know how many years to perfect my English so I can publish in journal articles. Now this can be done in a jiffy. So same thing with coding. To code in statistics and multivariate analysis, it would take an enormous amount of time, and the investment was huge. Now it can be done. And
interestingly today, if you look at, there are different personalities that continue to show up, that continues to pop up in the news as well. Recently, Donald Trump made a loud statement. He says, in the United States of America, there would only be two genders that will be recognized, male and female. Now, there are another set of people who are talking about diversity, who are talking about inclusion. I'm just wondering, being a psychologist, for the time being, let's forget who said what. If you look at these two personalities, what do you think? What's the differences and the similarities between these two personalities?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Gaurav, because I assume there's a lot of variation within these two different types. They say that there's two types of people in the world: those who believe there are two types of people and those who don't. So it was exactly two types of people. There's a lot of variation between these two approaches. Well, to be what's so dogmatic about things, I find, generally speaking, doesn't work. To be that this is how it is, and there's no other way in which it is. Now, what appears to be on the question of gender, I think my humble opinion is, I'm not trying to convert anybody, or I'm not coming from any kind of, I don't have any agenda on this, but this comes from an understanding, a conflation of the nature of being with a body. If you have this idea that I am this body, okay, which is not this is not the right idea. It's not a factual idea. If you have that idea, starting from this idea, then all sorts of things can be derived. So there's either male or female, but you're way beyond the body. The question of male and female is not a question. There is like a masculine and feminine energy, that's right, which just arises in all sorts of configurations inside you, but you are not this body. So for me to take the point, assuming we are not this body, and therefore you're already making them. If you think you are this, that's a fundamental mistake.
No,
what is the solution? I don't know what the solution is, because we have been moving into a situation now, particularly in the Western world, where things that apparently look very nonsensical from a common perspective happen. We have like male athletes or formerly male athletes like competing in female sports, and that just doesn't feel right. Okay, but that's not to deny the identity of a human being. So if a human being identifies as female or male or something in between,
So I personally believe that if there's one subject that everyone should go through, should build awareness around, I think that should be emotional intelligence, right? Because unless I'm aware of my emotions, I'm going to fall on the same patterns again and again and again without realizing that it's not out there. The triggers are not out there. There's something which is unprocessed within my own self. Now, from your perspective, what do you think, as a parent, what are the things that one needs to be mindful of that would allow a child to start to grow emotional maturity from the very start of the growth and the fostering?
God, that's again very difficult. But the first thing that you got to realize here is that the parent doesn't really have full control of their children, because very early on they'll need to be sent to school, and then there's a different kind of a program that's being implemented there. So you might be working at odds. The best way, because I had this conversation with some people I highly respected, and they say that the best way is by your example. So if you can give an example to your children and everyone around you to get them interested into that kind of lifestyle, because it's a lifestyle. It's not the fact that you can't live any old life and then slap like a stick 20 minutes of meditation in it and then expect to develop self-awareness.
No.
As I said, the 20 minutes of meditation will start getting you interested to start correcting all those things. So I wish there were a way that you can actually do, and to some extent, in the traditional education of this country, you have the gurukuls.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can go to a gurukul, and then there can be a culture there that focuses and enhances self-awareness. That's the whole point. But that is not for the majority, unfortunately, of children. That it doesn't happen. So if you go into the mainstream educational system, there are other things that have been prioritized, like the mind and that stuff. So I don't think that the parent can do it. The best thing a parent could do, in my humble opinion, I'm not telling anyone what to do. I think it's just you find a teacher that you respect, and then or maybe outside of school. You can do gurukul in outside. So you do your mainstream education, whatever it is, and then you also have a gurukul, and then give all the responsibilities to an expert rather than try and do it yourself. The parents have to work on themselves first and foremost. So again, look after themselves
another
first.
subject that has intrigued me a lot is because in my own journey as somebody who's always been interested in human behavior, I'm not a professor, nor I'm a teacher. I just learn by talking to people like you. And that's the reason I just love these interactions. I've been quite fascinated because there are different phases that I have personally gone through. There was a time when everyone was becoming a motivational speaker. Then there was a time when everyone was talking about positive psychology. Then there came a time where people were talking about somatics and psychosomatics. And there are different subjects that have been introduced in the world of behavioral sciences. Some time back, I was going through a magazine and this word came my way: positivity and toxic positivity. What is the difference, and how do these two show up in the world that we are a part of?
Yeah, I haven't come across this particular terminology, but by toxic positivity, you mean like forced positivity?
Yeah,
you
you
have
can
to
do
be
it,
positive. You can
be positive.
Yeah, that's difficult, and that's yes, because it's like forced positivity, and you always have to be, and that just goes against the grain of things, because it's like the natural cycle is like different seasons, night and day, and you cannot force yourself to be. It can't be. You can only bring awareness to the, and I'm saying this, I've worked with this a lot, so I know what I'm talking about here. I know what I'm talking about in general. But on this point, I've spent a lot of time, and it's just, you have to be aware of the emotions as they arise and not try to suppress. You cannot be positive. Well, it's like saying, how do I make it to be day or summer all the time? Or day
it's like
all the
bypassing. Without processing an emotion, you're
can't.
bypassing, say, you can do it, it's absolutely fine,
can't.
everything is okay,
Yeah, you can't. I mean, these things, so this self-doubt is arising, the negativity arises, anger will arise. So as long as you witness it and just allow it, and you don't run away from it, or you don't allow it to hijack yourself, just simply witness it and observe it, then very interesting, important, perennial sources of bliss are going to open. So you can be blissful while being sad. Yes, you can. That's the important.
You can be blissful and yet while being sad.
While being sad, yes,
that's
you can be blissful while being upset. Because you're always blissful. Because Nithyananda is always there, right? So you can always be blissful. You can only start understanding this if you allow those so-called negative emotions to rise and then come into your awareness and then fall. You know, they're going to be there for a while. It's just like clouds. And you can learn to be blissful. It'll take some time, but you can learn to be blissful while these things are happening.
You know, just curious, as I'm listening to you, as you mentioned, once we start to process, once we start to watch as if it's a cloud, it would serve you and move out of your body. Right?
Yes.
I'm just curious, is it something like there are certain emotions who will take more time to get processed in this body, and there are few emotions which will get less? Or, I don't know, if there's any process that we have to go through to process?
Is the a process of learning. I mean, you have to learn things like the lessons that you were mentioning before. You are not learning the lessons, then they'll come again and again, and they'll last longer and longer. But the more that you learn the lessons, and the more you allow these emotions to be, okay, without fueling them, without rejecting them, then they will lose their grip on you. It's just a process of deconditioning. Whereas, if you move in to start forcing yourself to be, I mean, Jiddu Krishnamurti had this a very wonderful expression about this: the censor of the mind. That the censor comes in and rejects experience. So I have some kind of attachment to my son or my spouse or my and then I said, how can I detach? But Krishnamurti was saying attachment is the reality. You got to observe the reality. If you move in with a mind to start a war with attachment, start a war with anger, start a war with fear, then you're going to be in conflict. Don't go through that in a kind of conscious, motivated kind of manner. You just allow it to be there, and you try to decondition yourself from all this, the positive, the negative, the pleasurable, the painful. You're trying to decondition yourself, which is like really what for example, the Naga sadhus do. Okay, we're going now, because I just came back from Kumbh, and they just want to eradicate their preferences for certain things in the environment. They don't want to have any preference for positive and negative. They just, and just experience Satchitananda. But if you take a part of experience and you say, well, I'm not going to relate to this because I don't like it. I don't like sadness. I don't like fear. I don't like aging. I don't like. Then you create the ground for conflict. They can't be avoided. The way out of it is to simply decondition yourself, and from the pleasurable things as well, by the way.
You use the word reality in between. And you said that you have to meet your reality. If you're experiencing attachment, you cannot just announce a war against attachment and get totally detached. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by you have to find your reality, and only then you can unprogram or deprogram yourself?
Well, you got to realize what your real nature is, which is not this body, and that's why I keep going back to that. Because if I start inquiring, but if I'm not this body, then what am I? Like a Ramana Maharshi style. Who is this I? Find out who this I is, and then when you realize what your true nature is, then you learn to relate to the stimuli and what's going on around you in a completely different way, which you don't have. This possibility is not there for someone who is attached to it's simply not there. You don't have a choice. But when you do realize what your true nature is, then you have a choice. I mean, whether I'm going to act.
Would it be a fair assumption to make, since you're talking about once you realize your true nature, wouldn't it be a fair assumption to make that all of us have got the same absolute reality, same absolute nature?
But there are no differences out there. There's no differences between anyone and anyone else. There's no difference between me and you. There is no me and you. There's just one whole energy, or nothing. Everything is nothing, and nothing is everything, and that is what the reality is. So everything else is illusion.
So then, what is the anatomy of? Let's say you use the word attachment. What is the anatomy of fear? What's the anatomy of grief?
The psychological anatomy of it. I mean, it starts from all these. The common starting point is identification with the body. Once you identify with the body and you separate yourself from everything else, you find yourself, then conflict, grief, anger, all these things are inevitable. It's just inevitable. There's no, you're not going to find anger or fear in some region of the brain like they're doing, okay? So you can't say fear is here and anger is there. This is all like psychological. It's coming from the fact that there's a misidentification. And once you misidentify, then of course you are in difficult circumstances, because just this little body and this universe out there, and there's people you like, people you don't like, people who you think treat you well, people who you don't think treat you well, and all that stuff. With that comes fear, anger, and all that stuff. It's inevitable, and you have to keep working with that. So I've written a draft of a book. I've been working for a long time, and I actually have a wonderful graph that shows how these emotions, which I can't remember off the top of my head, so I have to. But I have like a graph that shows psychologically how these emotions come about and what the difference is between the two fundamental emotions that create everything else are greed and fear.
Greed and fear.
Wow. So it's like moving away from things and because you're afraid, or moving towards like trying to get pain and pleasure. Everything maps onto these two. So you can have like a diagram that like a decision-making tree that tells you how all the other emotions come from these two.
I've come across people who would continue to be in denial. Right? They would experience a sense of resentment within themselves, and yet they would not be willing to move away from something that has already happened.
Yeah.
So,
And it's not easy, and I'm not blaming anybody. I mean, it's not because you can logically and rationally talk about this. Well, this happened in the past. You can't change it now. You can't change the past. And in fact, Bhagwan Nithyananda says you can change the past, but I don't want to go into that. But logically and rationally, you can say if someone it's happened in the past is right. There's no worth. It's not worth crying over spilled milk. And the logical thing to do is move forward. But
now
of course, there's an emotional.
That's toxic
positivity, and it negates the emotional experience of the of the individual,
and does not allow you to meet your own reality.
It doesn't. No, because it says forget about it. You're being completely illogical and irrational because obviously this thing has happened in the past and it can't be changed. So now you got to move forward. Okay, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, but the emotional component could actually be weighing very, very hard on the individual, and they need to work with that because it is true in the final analysis that whatever has happened has happened.
And when you say that they have to work through, what does that mean? What are the
just
practices?
observe it, stay with it, not again. I mean that's just observe it. Don't try to run away. Don't try. In fact, even trying to rationalize, just look at it. Just look at it. Slowly but slowly it will happen. Most people completely run away from it. They'll go on pills. They'll go on booze. They'll go just trying to bury it. Other people will try to become workaholics if something happens to forget about it.
So does it mean, since you're talking about they will go all over, they will get into boozing, they'll become workaholics. So does it mean that because there's something deep within themselves that they're trying to avoid?
Escapism, yeah.
And that's where they are escaping from there and getting into any kind of addictions. It could be addiction of, let's say, alcohol or boozing or
or socially
workaholics.
rewarded addictions, like, for example, workaholism. Work all day long. That's socially rewarded and acceptable. But you are escaping from what needs to be processed. So the important thing is, or those who become then more psychological and they go into clinical aspects and they start rationalizing and cognitive behavioral theory, and you start to analyze like this, it's apparently deeper, but it's not going to complete things either.
This is such a profound learning that I'm getting from you, and I would want my audience of this podcast to take a pause in this moment and ask yourself if you have got any kind of addiction for yourself. It could be as simple as if you're a workaholic, or if you've got any kind of addiction, it could be alcohol, or it could be smoking as well.
Could be
what
cricket.
Is it? Cricket, right?
Bollywood.
What is it that you are avoiding in this moment because of which you are escaping rather than sitting in that moment with the reality and observing that emotion and moving towards something? Is it like greed or fear? I think that's a beautiful learning, Petridis. Thank you so much for bringing that.
Well, I mean, I've learned these things from others. I mean, it's not things that I discovered myself. So I've given some references here. I'm very grateful to all of my teachers, of course. It's not something that, just
Who has
I
been your
discovered.
teacher?
Well, I said, Bhagwan Nithyananda I mentioned many times, and Paramhamsa Satyananda, who gave me the initial, and from then on, so much Jiddu Krishnamurti.
It's a lot of spiritual grounding.
Oh, absolutely, I think. Absolutely.
Let's shift gear. The other emotion that I would like to take a deeper dive in is, especially in the corporate context where I work in, an emotion that I've come across is the emotion of shame. Very often I come across where people don't call it shame, and yet they hold it in their body.
Say more about this, then I want to hear about that.
It's like shame of being a boy, shame of being a girl, shame of being not at all so effective, shame of
you mean more exposed. Like self-doubt, not shame as like
be,
embarrassment, because
yeah.
Shame is in short supply, I think, in the world these days. So many people are so shameless out there. I sometimes think. Yes, but if you mean in terms of like self-doubt and,
it could be
lack of confidence.
Or shame could also be that I'm not being able to do as good as I'm expected to do from the societal point of view, from my parents' point of view.
Comparison, yes, yes.
So tell me more about that, and especially in the context of corporate, it's a very familiar emotion for me.
Yes, I think there must be a better word for that than shame, and I wonder what that might be. It might come into my Greek mind at some point, but it's just like it's that feeling of feeling short, of having been found to be short, or not, like self-doubt, lack of confidence. that comparison with others that finds you coming short. Well, it's very common because it's a very competitive society, and if you enter that race, then you got to find out, sometimes win, sometimes lose, and some people carry this feeling of coming up short, and it's a direct result of this competitive mindset. So if you get into competitions, then there are other people who are equally competitive or more competitive.
And where does that come from, as per you?
Yes, it's just lack of self-understanding, self-knowledge. I mean, it's a personality trait. These are like perceptions within the individual. So if an individual has either conscious or more commonly a subconscious perception of lack, of inefficacy, of insufficiency, and they go out there and they try to prove themselves by competing with others, subjugating others, and drawing attention, resources to themselves. It's some psychological insufficiency that operates, usually from the subconscious mind, and unfortunately, whatever achievement you do out there in the world, external achievement, is not going to satisfy that inner urge. And then you keep amassing and keep accumulating and keep hoarding things.
So this is like chasing illusion.
It is.
You will continue to chase
that's
something
that's it.
that's not going to assist you and address the emotion that you're experiencing.
That's right. That's why you see people are working flat out for decades, and even though they have enough for themselves, their children, and their children's children, but there's still that sense of lack and insufficiency and having to prove oneself, which like operates internally.
Climbing a mountain without the top.
That's it. That's it. That's a very good analogy. Just keep climbing. You think you're going to get
one day I'm going to chase it.
One day.
And is it by any chance, are these genetic as well? Now, since you are talking about that generations after generations, there are people that I've come across who are very, 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 very abundant in their own ways of looking at themselves, and their children are also. But at the same time, I've come across several examples where parents are competing, so are their children.
Yes, no, well, in this country, of course, we have karmic explanations which take precedence over genetic. I don't like these body-based explanations of behavior, of psychology specifically. So I don't like brain-based explanations. I don't like genetic-based explanations. I always look for psychological, philosophical explanations. So obviously there's an environment operating anyway, even if you say that, okay, there's a genetic influence with a geneticist. So the data, let's put it this way, the scientific data shows that yes, there is a there's a genetic influence. And of course, on top of that, there's an environmental influence and an interaction between those two. So, yes, just to answer your question in a straightforward manner, yes, there is a genetic, there's now you got to find out where this is coming from and what to do about it.
Yeah. And in your experience, since it appears to me that India has a huge impact and influence onto you, the way you look at life, have you experienced any shift, have you come across, I mean, according to you, is there any difference the way Indians process emotions and the way people in the US or people in London, they process emotions?
You can't overgeneralize, let's say, because there's 1.5 billion people here, and I don't know, 350. So you can't overgeneralize. But as a culture, of course, it's completely different. And I mean, India is a completely different culture, far more accepting, I think. Far more open. I mean, this idea of spirituality, enlightenment, this like real, like genuine psychology, as opposed to the psychology as busyness. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but it's still very much, and it has been from the very beginning. It's a civilization that's really based on ideas of enlightenment and ideas of consciousness, the teaching, and of course dealing with your emotions and all the other things that are secondary in this process. So it's still very much, it's steeped in the culture, in the symbolism, in what you see around you. Absolutely, and that's what I find so extremely appealing. Yes, and I hope it lasts. I hope it doesn't.
Course it will.
Very much.
It will.
It's like, if you look at a country like Greece, for example, which had some. Never mind. Let's skip that.
Okay. So since we are talking about this continuum, right? We just touched on these two emotions. On the other hand, if you look at emotion like love and bliss, you spoke about. Tell me more about that. What is so unique about love that it attracts? What's so unique about bliss that people, they would want to experience that? What's so unique about abundance and generosity? that brings a smile on your face as you're just thinking about it?
Yes. Um, Love, again, there are different types of love. I mean, if by love we mean attachment to a spouse, attachment to children, that's not really
Love.
prem.
What is
as
love?
you say, it's not prem. So what is love? I mean, there are different types of love. It's the love that a mother has for the child, or the love for relatives, or love for what gives us pleasure, spouse. Yeah, that's love mixed with attachment. So it's not pure, it's not prem.
Yeah. How would you define, let's say, pure love?
Pure love simply emanates from the nature of being. I mean, it's part of Satchitananda as well, because if there's no duality, if there's no distance or space between them, then love is the first emotion that flourishes. But it's not like romantic love or a hug a tree kind of love. It's just love like natural interest in you, because I don't understand you. It's the same love that you have for yourself. I don't understand you as separate. So my emotions towards you are benign, and I'm interested in you because that's how it is. You're part of me, and it's that kind of love. But it's not love that is attached. You know, in other words, you know, if you do me some wrong, or if you start misbehaving, I'm not going to have a problem saying, you know, sir, you know, this we got a problem here, which is something that a mother might have with a child. You know, no matter what they do, they'll say, you know, they have to, because it's mixed with attachment.
It has a seasoning of attachment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's more than a season. Sometimes it's more than a season.
That is the main dish.
So yes.
Yeah.
So it's egoic. A lot of it is egoic. Whereas love is something that emanates naturally. It's like bliss is always there. Bliss, love, Satchitananda. Satchitananda, that's the nature of reality. And everyone wants to experience, to discover and experience. Actually, everyone is already experiencing it, but because of all the debris of the mind that we have, and the emotions that are hijacking the whole system, we need to work to clean, and work to clean a lot of time. Yes, it takes time. It's not easy.
You know, in your experience, I mean, I just love the way you define pure love. And as you mentioned, that it does not come from any kind of attachment. It comes from a space of Satchitananda. It comes from a space of bliss, right? And you can just be with somebody and being in love with that person. I think that's there's so much of stillness in the thought itself. There's so much of joy in the thought itself. There's so much of equanimity. There's so much of equanimity in the thought itself. Now, having said that, now if I were to shift gears 180 degrees, and if I were to look at the corporate culture that we are a part of, people are aware that they are struggling in the context of emotional intelligence, and yet they continue to follow the same path. What is it about the culture that does not support an individual to work on that emotions, to work on their emotions?
That's an excellent question, and I don't think it's specific to corporate culture. I mean, society as a whole is programmed. So I don't think by any means that the corporate world is so much different from it. The whole of society is geared towards taking you out from these and getting you interested in competing, achieving, and proving yourself from very early on. And so I don't think it's specific to the corporate world only. I mean, maybe we'll hear more about it there because it's more in the news, but it's the same kind of society that produces.
So what is it about society that does not allow an individual to grow emotionally?
Well, society is not your friend. I mean, that's the individual needs to find out that society is not your friend. Society operates there for its own purposes, which is, you know, then you need to have your inputs into society and work for it. But society is not your friend. It's not interested in so you have to take responsibility for your own being. That's what it is. When a lot of society is like least common denominatorism. You know, the lowest of the low. There's no interest in the individual. So the individual needs to take care. You know, if you expect society or the government anywhere in the world to take care of your inner needs, then it's just not going to happen. There's a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of people that look up to the government and the state, but that's not the function of the government and the state, and you're going to be let down.
And as per your research, Petridis, which are those emotions that people find difficult to express?
people find it difficult to express appreciation, gratitude, love. They
find it difficult to express.
To express, yes.
Wow.
They find it difficult to
So
to
tell me more,
express this emotion.
appreciation, gratitude.
Gratitude, love, appreciation, because it's not really part of the everyday transactions. And also, at the same time, they try to be circumspect concerning their fears, their anxieties. These are
They don't express this either.
They don't, but it's not because they find it difficult. It's because they self-censor. So
They don't want to get exposed.
that's it. Yes, yes. They don't want to get exposed. Yes. Because it's frowned upon and it creates problem. But people find it difficult to express themselves. Generally speaking, like emotions like love, appreciation, just gratitude.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if I may ask, which emotion do you find it difficult to express?
I try to find. There's no particular emotion that I find. I think I'm generally expressive. Sometimes I'm a little bit over-expressive with certainly for Western standards. But of course I'm Greek, so we tend to be more passionate about things. So I don't have a problem expressing my emotions. I might have a little problem curtailing my negative emotions. Yes.
And
yes.
those are?
Well, anger. I mean, I've got an anger. I've been fighting with anger. I've got an anger issue. That's for sure. Now, obviously, don't worry about it here. But but it depends where I'm. But then again, I mean, I've worked on this a lot. That's why I mentioned Jiddu Krishnamurti before. It's just the censor that comes and says you shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't be expressing anger. Do something about your anger, and that's what creates all the conflict and duality. So I've gradually come to accept it. That every now and again I will erupt. I try to do it in safe spaces and safe circumstances. Yes, I wish I didn't have it, but it's there. So hopefully at some point it will subside.
Yeah. And if anger could communicate something to you, what would it communicate to you?
Anger communicates that you're simply you're not rooted where you need to be. I mean, there's no point why anybody should be getting angry. I mean, anger means that there's a fundamental identification with the body. So you're angry because somebody's not doing what you want them to do. Okay, you get angry because you feel threatened. But it all comes back to this identification with this body. And if you lose that identification, then you say there's no reason to be angry. Wow. Just watch it. It doesn't. There is a point where this is going to become natural. I hope I'm on the way to there. But at that point, you just have to accept that it's part of the Constitution, of my Constitution anyway. Other people have it as well, I know. Yeah. Other people have fear, other people. So you just have to witness it and see how it goes.
And I just love it when you said that it's very important for us to disidentify ourselves with this body. And as you mentioned about anger, right? I have an emotion that I've been dealing with, and to a large extent I've been able to deal with that attachment, right? I tend to get attached. I tend to get attached to people. I tend to get attached to my things, right? I tend to get attached to the gifts if somebody special has given me that gift. I've been able to work on that to a large extent. At the same time, I'm also dealing with several emotions that I'm not comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with jealousy. When I feel jealous of somebody, I feel bad about that. Because one of the basic values that I really value is contribution, right? One of the basic values that I value is gratitude. And in my mind, I wonder, on one hand, gratitude is my value. On one hand, contribution is my value. On the other hand, this friend of mine is sitting with me through and throughout, which is jealousy.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to give me some steps that might help me to deal with this, what are those practices, what are those actions that I can put into my own life that might help me?
Well, any kind of question like that needs to be dealt with by a guru, and I'm not your guru, so I can't give you advice about this specifically. I'd say it's the same, this inner struggle that we experience. I got the same thing, maybe jealousy triggers it in you, and anger triggers it in me. And there's certain things that we're feeling, and we're thinking that we shouldn't be feeling them. Yeah. So Jiddu Krishnamurti's answer to this is just simply observe it. Because if you get into this conflict, that me versus my jealousy, me versus, then it's not going to work. But I mean, that's a general approach to this problem, and that's not my advice to you. So my advice to you is address the question to your guru. Yeah. And they will tell you.
And you mentioned that you're writing a book.
Yes, I've been writing this book for about 10 years now.
And I'm sure there would be a chapter, the practices that might assist you to dissociate with these emotions. What's written in that book? chapter?
Oh, I said I've been writing this book for like no, more than 10 years, 12 years now, and writing, revising, so I can't really remember what's in most of the book anymore. But I mean, I deal with all these emotions and give like this generic advice, which is quite useful, if you put it in practice. But my general advice to people who are sensitive to this is, you got to find a guru, because it's not one thing. See, it's not one thing that we have to deal with. This is like an illusion that the mind creates. It puts you up the garden path, and you say, well, my life is pretty much okay, and the only problem that I have to deal with is I've got a bit of an anger problem, or I don't have quite enough money now, but if I solve this problem,
jealousy and hurt,
all these
envy,
things,
there's so many
whatever it is that we're
emotions.
missing, and the mindful, just everything's okay. It's just only if you deal with this little thing, then you start dealing with this, then there's another little thing. But if you were to see, the entirety of your mind in a mirror, that would actually shock an individual, including the subconscious mind. But it's a trick that the mind plays, it's saying just keep you asleep, keep the ego asleep. Don't worry about it. It's just like a little thing, you work on this, and it doesn't work. It doesn't. You solve one problem, another one.
So mind is always tricking you.
Absolutely.
So our responsibility is to dissociate and disidentify with the mind.
Absolutely.
And face the reality and go take a deeper dive into the emotion that you're not comfortable with. And from there, continue to observe.
Absolutely. If the mind plays this game, it's got to be watched, and then let's see what happens.
Mind is playing tricks with you.
That's right. Yes. The mind is also not your friend. And you got to find what it is. And the mind is one of the most difficult attributes and qualities to deal with, because
I'm not surprised it's known as the monkey mind.
It's the monkey, as you say. Yes, it's the monkey mind. You have to lose respect for the mind, and that's not easy. That's why you call the monkey mind always jumps from here, but it never reveals itself. The totality. The totality of its ugliness to you, because it would run. It's like, I think Bhagavad Gita is the chapter 11 where like Krishna takes this threatening form and presents himself to Arjuna. Arjuna says, go, I don't want to see this anymore. Go away from me. It's just like, if you look at the mind like that, you'd be shocked. But the mind just, its point is to, the ego specifically, is to keep you asleep. So therefore it says, you fix this little thing here, fix that little thing there. By the time you know it, you're 70, 80, you're trying to fix a little thing here, and that's fine, and that's another Janma gone.
One of the questions that's often asked by people is ego bad?
Well, ego is a tyrant, yes, it's a tyrant. Now, there are egos that are more poisonous than others. Yes, more poisonous than others. But ego is just simply blocking us from experiencing our true nature all the time. So, and that's where all the trouble starts. And the ego needs to have an anchor, and that anchor is the body. That's how the problem starts.
Anchor is our body. Thank you. I'm sure we can go on and on and on, but I'm aware that you have a flight to catch as well.
Next time,
stay tuned. We are going to take a deeper dive into
I'm very grateful
world
for the time.
Of ego.
Very grateful for the time you made and the questions that you asked. It was a wonderful conversation. I think it's probably, I don't want to say the deep. I think maybe it is probably the deepest conversation that I've had on camera. So I thank you for your questions, for making the time, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I genuinely heartfelt gratitude to you for making time, and looking forward to our friendship, our journey together in the world where we believe and we continue to experience bliss, as you call it, Satchidananda.
Amen to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. For me, it was a fascinating conversation. What I'm taking away from this conversation is to deal with my own shame in my life, how to deal with my own jealousies in my life, how to deal with a sense of comparison, because for as long as I continue to identify, as he would word it, for as long as I continue to identify with my body, I'll not be able to get out of the trap and the vicious circle and the grip of these emotions. And the easiest way is to go and sit in the heart of that unprocessed emotions, observe it, process it, and that's where you're going to go through, and then you're going to grow through. Thank you so much. Please follow us on all the channels. We are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcast. Do reach out to us in case we could be of any service to you. And I look forward to meeting you again, yet with another interesting conversation, with another fascinating guest next week. Take care, stay tuned, stay blessed.